Hey everybody, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Beekeeping for Newbies. Thank you so very much for taking the time to listen. I do appreciate you. And as always, feel free to reach out, Jeff at beekeepingfornewbies.com. That's NEWBEES.com. All right, everybody. Well, today we have a fun and exciting discussion to go over with you. There is this phenomenon that occurs, and it tends to happen. Usually, it's going to be a little bit different for every area, every beekeeper. But this is something that I experienced. I can definitely remember this at least the first few years until I figured out what happened or what was going on. But I thought that I lost my queen, and it happened same time every year. And I've had a lot of people over the years that have been like, oh, I think I killed my queen. And so I immediately think, okay, well, I mean, they were the ones doing the inspection. They probably saw the queen. They may have seen her dead or saw themselves put the frame on top of her just before they did it, and they couldn't stop the the frame that was already in motion. And so we just start talking through, okay, well, these are all the things you got to do to remedy the situation and to make it better. But there's a couple of things I want to talk to you about, because if you notice this and if you're keeping records and you say, I've noticed that every year when I do inspections between the 7th and the 15th of June, I always have problems finding my queen. And I definitely know that I was almost convinced those first couple of years that I had killed her. What is taking place is not necessarily, now again, you may have killed your queen. It is entirely possible that has happened. But there's a little kind of interesting thing that I think all of you need to know about, and I think that this will serve you well. I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but worker honeybees, specifically nurse bees, will eat and consume eggs that your queen has laid. Now, when I first heard this, it was like the brakes locked up, and I was like, what are you talking about? Why would that even happen? That doesn't make sense. Right? The queen's job is to lay eggs. She's in charge. If she's laying an egg, why would that egg not be raised into a new, worker or queen as needed, or whatever the case might be? There is this false idea within the hive that the queen is in charge and kind of runs everything. The reality of that is the nurse bees are kind of in charge. So the queen has to have that queen pheromone present to make everybody kind of want to go to work and be motivated to do their job. But as far as laying goes, the nurse bees are going to clean everything up, and they're going to say, yeah, queen, that area over there, section 4, 8, and 12, they're ready to go. She's going to go through and lay wherever they tell her to lay, and she'll just keep cranking out eggs. And then when they don't want her to lay eggs anymore, they're going to be like, yeah, we're good. Now, a lot of that can get regulated in a couple different ways. I don't want to go too deep on this one, but the queen, well, let's do a quick little sidebar on this. If you've ever noticed that when your queen shows up in a queen cage, or for those of you who are starting out brand new beekeeping, and you get package bees, or you could even see this in a nuke, but hopefully your nukes already have their queen released. But you'll have a queen cage, and inside you have your queen and a couple of attendants. The attendants, of course, they're there to provide food to feed the queen, whatever sugar plug or whatever is in there. They're going to take that in. They're going to feed it to her. But that queen, if she's not actively laying and doesn't have good access to feed, her body will physically get smaller. You'll look at her and you're going to say, that's the queen? I saw all these pictures online, and it has this big, plump, beautiful, queen. And this little skinny, scrawny thing is my queen. When she is restricted from laying and from food, her body will get smaller. So when she's not eating, she's not going to lay. So there's all these little checks and balances that take place within the hive. Tied to this as an example, really cool kind of fun fact. When the bees know they're getting ready to swarm, they're going to restrict feeding of the queen. So when she's going to be, taking in less food, she's not going to lay eggs, or will be significantly reduced in the number she's laying. She will physically get skinnier and scrawnier, like you see in that queen cage. And then when it's time to swarm, she's nice and lightweight and is able to fly. Imagine trying to get this big, heavy, plump laying queen and having her flying around. It doesn't work as well. But when she's trimmed down a little bit and she's not actively laying and they're restricting her, she's much more able to do that. The same kind of thing can take place in day-to-day normal activities within the hive. Where I am, we have that big spring ramp up. We have a nice long summer dearth. During that dearth, she probably is still laying a few eggs here and there. I mean, she's definitely laying some. But those nurse bees are coming by going, nope, we don't have food coming in. We're not going to raise them. And it's an amazing, like I mentioned earlier with the checks and the balances, it's really amazing the way that they say, okay, foragers, what do you got for us? And the foragers say, well, we're finding some pollen. We're not having a lot of luck on nectar. And they just say, okay, well, based on what's coming in, that's what drives that activity. So the combination of how they restrict and manage the queen, how they either raise or cannibalize the eggs, those things are all contributing factors to what you're going to see on that brood frame. Now, did you kill your queen? I think it's you can make the argument that if this is something you see, this absence of the queen and no eggs, because like you've heard me say many times before, and many beekeepers will tell you this, if you can't find your queen every time, don't worry about it. Just look for eggs and larvae. Well, if that queen is actively laying and things are going great and you've got tons of eggs, larvae, uncapped, capped brood, everything is going well, and you're not even thinking about looking for the queen because you don't need to, everything is there, but then you haven't really learned how to find your queen and identify her, then you get to this situation right here and it's kind of an oh crap moment because your only assumption is that she's gone, which she most likely is not. She's holding back, she's not laying. And you kind of don't know what she looks like because you haven't really put the effort in to learn how to find her. Now, you've heard me say this several times before. When you're new, it's a little bit weird trying to figure out, oh, there she is. No, wait, that's her. Wait, I've got 8 queen, the 10, I got 20. Everything kind of looks like a queen. You see the bigger drone and you're like, oh, it must be this bigger bee. The dead giveaway that I tell everybody, worker bees, their wings go from the head to toe, basically front all the way back to the back of the abdomen. Their whole body is basically wings. Drones are the same thing. They're bigger, fatter, and they've got wings that go from the nose to, well, not from their nose, but from their shoulders all the way back, from the top of their thorax all the way back to the end of their abdomen. The queen, her wings, just like the other two, will start, in the thorax and they'll go backwards, but they only go about halfway or 2/3 the total length of her body. And then there's this long abdomen behind her. That's what you really want to look for when you're identifying your queen. And that really long extended abdomen is what allows her to deeply place the eggs when she's laying eggs deep down into the cells. Which, as a quick sidebar, if you're ever concerned that you have a laying worker, that's one thing you can look for. Because remember, the abdomen on the worker is much smaller than the queen. So if you see eggs that are stuck to the sides of the cell, that's because your laying worker couldn't insert them as deeply as your queen could. Little side fun fact for you. So when you've invested the time during the season to learn to identify your queen, that really will help you later on when you're at the time of year where there is a dearth, she's not laying, or at least new worker brood is not being raised, but you're still able to learn how to find her. And like I mentioned earlier, she might shrink up a little bit and get a little bit smaller, making it even more difficult. It's always important to remember that bees are really, really good at regulating themselves. And this is where when people ask about feeding, well, should I feed my bees? It's always kind of like, it really depends. There are situations where it really makes a lot of sense, but they are so good at knowing their environment. Now, this is really tricky too, right? Because you're taking a brand new package of bees or a brand new nucleus colony that you got from somewhere else, and you're just assuming that the European honeybee is going to work wherever you are here. Let's say, for example, in North America, right? If you're in Europe where the European honeybee is native to, you may have better results than somewhere else. But just because you are in the U.S. and they will ship bees to your house, it doesn't mean that your house has the right forage to support honeybees. So one thing that's always a good thing to know early on is there a bee club here? Are other beekeepers in my neighborhood having success? It's like, oh, wow, that's weird. There's 1,000, homes in my neighborhood and nobody here is a beekeeper. Is that because there's just no interest in it in your neighborhood? Or is it because people have tried repeatedly and failed and just realized there's not enough forage to support honeybees? If you are in an area, like I think that where I live is really, really challenging to keep honeybees because that dearth period is really tough. Now, I keep bees successfully here, but I've done it by really significantly minimizing the amount of honey I take for myself. Now, flip that down to the property that I have, that I refer to as the apiary down in North Carolina. Resources are abundant down there. You can throw a few colonies out there and kind of walk away, and they're just going to go crazy. There's a nice cycle. There is still a dearth down there, but there's just more availability more consistently, and it's a rural area, and it's a little bit better suited for honeybees. But just because bees show up at your house doesn't mean your house is a good place for bees, which brings you back to, do I need to feed? And this goes into another thing that I always try to advocate for. I always say, hey, look, in your first year, don't take honey. Get through that first full year of just building up this brand new colony. Go into year 2, see how they overwintered, right? See how that spring flow is for them. I've had, colonies at my house pull in 100 pounds of honey, and I've left it alone and come back at the end of the winter. Come back at the end of the summer, and it's less than half of that, where they're sitting at like 35, 40 pounds in, September, October. And I'm just thinking, like, how did they go through all of that? They went through a lot of it during that summer dearth. So that's where quite often a lot of people will say, oh, cool. We've got 100 pounds of honey here. I'm going to pull 70 pounds off for me. I'm going to leave 30 pounds for the bees because they still have the fall flow. Well, they may use 25 or 30 pounds just to get through the summer dearth, get to the fall, have nothing, have a light fall flow. Then maybe you can feed them enough in time for them to make it, enough stores, resources to get through the winter, maybe. But a lot of times it doesn't work out. So the bees are very, very good at regulating things within the hive. So when you say, contrary to whatever you're seeing in the environment here, honeybees, I'm going to give you a bunch of supplemental feeds. You might be fine with that. It might work really well, especially if you're in a situation where you're trying to, here's an example. A lot of people say, man, I want more I want more drawn comb. So if you're feeding them sugar syrup, trying to get them to draw more comb by creating an artificial nectar flow, they will do that. They will draw up more comb. They will store more nectar. They will rear more brood. But you also have to just be mindful and cognizant of the fact that you're doing this outside of what the environment supports. So you're doing this contradictory to what the bees know about the environment. Now, that can be, sometimes they know what's best for them, and sometimes you kind of have to intervene. So going again to a typical summer example, if you started a package of bees, let's say, here's a better example. You have some bees that overwintered, everything's going great. You've had a wonderful spring with them. Middle of May, you decided to do a split. Let's say you had a queen cell. Queen came back, was mated, started laying around the 1st of June. And now you have what is the equivalent of like a 4-frame nuke in the middle of June where I live. So 4-frame nuke going into the dearth. That colony is not going to make it. I can tell you right now, whatever you want to make a bet on it, bring me the best bees you have and we can place them here. If it's in a 4-frame nuke, it's not going to make it through the summertime without some supplemental feeding, because everything dries up and there's nothing here for 6 to 8 weeks. And you say, well, Jeff, that's kind of contradictory to what you said, because they're in your environment. They're already there. They overwintered. Why wouldn't they succeed? Because I split them up and I took resources away from one to make a new colony. That's why, going back, geez, we got so many tangents that I say we as if you guys are involved, like you're the ones who are doing it. But I'm going off on all these tangents today because they're spurring all these other thoughts. But that's why swarming can be so dangerous. Not dangerous like hazardous, but dangerous to the survivability of your colony. You have all of these bees that you have been able to raise within this colony here. And then you're like, okay, half you guys, see you later. And they go out into the wild to start a new colony, probably right before the worst time of year, right? Swarm season around, let's say they swarm the first part of May. By the time they swarm, leave here, and start to get set up, they've maybe got 3 or 4 weeks. Let's just say they got 4 full weeks of ramp up, and that's it. That means they have to get everything they need completely drawn out, completely stored up and put away, and enough to get through at a minimum to the fall flow. So that's terrible for them. Their survivability is probably single digits, 8 to 10% probability maybe if they're lucky. And then the colony that just lost them, they're losing their up and coming workforce. It's going to take them a few weeks, probably about 3 weeks, just to recover what they just lost at the worst time of year possible when they should just be packing away pounds and pounds of honey. So again, a lot of disruptive things going on, but I really want you to be thinking about this. And it's tough because as you transition, I'm trying to work with a lot of different sets and groups of people here, but as you're transitioning, as you are transitioning from new beekeeper, brand new, to years 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you got to get beyond just it's this time of year, I'm going to do this kind of mentality. You really got to start peeling back the onion and diving in deeper and understanding the why of what you're doing. If you understand that, everything else is going to make sense. And it's the same thing here, right? You open up the hive as a new beekeeper. Your primary job is to just freak out every time you see something that doesn't make sense, right? Like job number one is be scared to death of getting stung, because that's what you're going to do. That's going to be on your mind. I remember going out there and being like, I don't want to get stung. I don't want to get stung. I don't want to get stung. So you're going to go out there and you're going to be afraid of being stung. And then you're going to get stung a few times. You kind of get used to it. And then everything is just, what am I afraid of next? What's the challenge, the crisis? Like what's going to pop up next? So when you go out there and you're like, crap, there's no eggs. Well, that's okay. Because you're trying, every time you do an inspection, you're trying to find that queen and, set a standard for yourself to say, look, I'll let myself not see her on a inspection, on my weekly inspection. But if I don't, I'll stay there for an extra half hour the next week to make sure I find her. Get used to seeing your queen. So you look in, you see no eggs, you say, oh, okay, well, it is coming up on a dearth, so that's normal. So you don't worry too much. But you still do your inspection. You come back again in your next inspection, you're going to look again. Give it a little bit of time if you don't see her. Another thing that you can always do, remember, if there's a nectar flow, the queen's going to lay. If you're really scared and concerned that she's gone, go ahead and put some kind of feeder, whether it's a top feeder, frame feeder, whatever your feeding methodology and approach is going to be, start feeding them and then see how they handle that. See if they go ahead and start taking up the syrup and start raising more brood. If you put feed in, let's say you did a Saturday inspection and then you came back and looked again on maybe Wednesday, you should see eggs, right? They're going to see that they have resources coming in, and that queen and the nurse bees who are regulating that activity should resume, and you should see some more egg production. Now, I want to go through a couple of things to remember or to be mindful of, to think about, what actually is potentially killing a queen. Because I hear this a lot, like for first year beekeepers, like I just got this package this year, or I just got this nuke this year. It is possible that you could have really poor genetics. Like the genetics on that bee could just be really terrible, and the bee has failed, or the colony maybe attempted to supersede her. Or maybe she, there's a number of things that are just specifically related to the quality of that queen. That's kind of rare. I mean, at least in my experience, that's kind of rare. I mean, if there's a bee that doesn't have necessarily traits that you like, or a queen that doesn't have traits that you like, that certainly is not unusual. But for her to be failing, like collapsing, like not functioning well at all, it's just not normal. They don't have spontaneous cardiac arrest and things like that taking place. So if you're in that first or second year with your queen, and again, the second year of the queen really should be her most productive. But let's say you're in this example we made earlier of a first year colony. If she's made it to the point where she's been out, she's emerged, she's gone on her mating flight, and she's made it to you in a cage and has been released and has been laying and everything is going great, chances are good she's overcome most of the genetic obstacles that would have kind of stopped her prior to that. Because there are things like we talked about with queens not making it back from mating flights. I mean, that's a big deal, and it's a challenge. I think that I had really good results at my house until the dragonflies realized the bees were here, and then I'd have 30 or 40 dragonflies flying through my yard all the time, which that's a whole separate story. But having bad genetics can certainly cause a queen to die or fail or to become superseded. So in the event of a supersedure, the colony will make a new queen cell. They will make a new queen and they will get rid of her. But if they do, this is where I go back to, okay, you don't see a queen, you don't see eggs, look around for some kind of a queen cell, swarm cell, supersedure cell, emergency cell. Look for something to give you an indication, because the colony is not going to take her out unless they've got a replacement plan. Now, there's always the scenario where you're manipulating frames, and the queens are very elusive, especially those younger queens. They can be a little skittish, and they're always going to try and hide from you. So I guess while we're talking about this, let's talk about a little bit of some queen safety measures that might make sense. When you are doing your inspections, a lot of people will take, it looks, I don't know what else you want to call it. It's a queen cage, but it kind of looks like a hair clip. And you can kind of, has a little spring on it. You can just squeeze it, set the queen down, drop her in that. Or you can use, like a queen cage or any kind of a small queen package. But a lot of people, when they see the queen on a frame, they will either put this down in front of them and let the queen walk into it, or they'll just pick her up by the wings. They'll just kind of, grab her by the two wings at the same time and pick her up and set her down inside the queen cage and set her off to the side while they do their inspection. I think that that's a great thing to do to make sure nothing happens to her. I have had the queen on a frame hanging on a hanger outside the hive, and I didn't realize it. And I saw it after I was getting ready to put everything back together. I'm like, oh, wow, the queen's out here. I didn't realize she was there. I mean, there's not a big issue with it. I have never had one say, freedom at last, let me leave here forever and jump off of the frame. But they could. Like, sometimes they do goofy stuff. I've had one in my hand. I had a virgin queen that just emerged out of a queen cell, and I caught her. I was like, oh, this is great. I'm going to put her into this other colony that I have that needs a queen. And I was doing something else, and I was like, oh, okay, cool. And then I opened my hand. I'm like, yep, she's there. Boom. She just flew right out of my hand. And I'm like, oh, come on. And she flew off, and I was not able to catch her, and I lost that queen. But when you have a queen that's in a colony and she's actively laying and engaged with that colony, she's not really going to want to leave, but you don't know. It may be an accident. Maybe she got scared and kind of just jumped, thinking she was jumping down into the hive and is actually jumping onto the ground. So if you can secure her, I definitely recommend that. As an alternative to hanging them on the side, like I just mentioned, for many years I've done this, is I'll have like a nuke box or a deep with me. And as I do my inspections, I'll just go ahead and flip the outer cover upside down so that the metal outer portion is on the ground. And I can set hive bodies down on top of it and stuff like that. But you can also just set an empty box on top of that has a solid bottom board on it. It's not meant to be used, for a hive because it's closed on the bottom. But you can go ahead and just drop them in that, make sure you want to have some ventilation. You don't want it to be completely sealed up and have them get too overheated in the summertime. But find a place you can put them where they are secure and they're safe and they can't get away, but they're out of harm's way. Now, if you're doing an inspection, and we'll just say that it's, heavy, I got to be careful how I word that. You're in a strong nectar flow. I don't want it to sound weird. You're in a strong nectar flow and you've got 7, 8, brood frames in there, and you're on frame number 3 and you find the queen. A lot of times I just put frame 3 back, pull out the next frame over in the direction that I'm, doing my my inspection. And then I won't put that 4th frame back in. I'll put that off to the side. That way there's a little bit of a buffer. Yes, she can always jump to the bottom, walk around. She can walk on the side walls. But a lot of times she's going to move over to a dark place and kind of hide. But if you know where she is, it makes it a lot easier to just kind of mentally track, okay, she's on frame 3. I'm going to keep working over here on 7, 8, 9, 10. But like I said, putting her in a cage and putting her to the side, that's generally a good, safe thing to do if you're able to do that. A lot of people are really scared about handling the queens. They're not going to sting you. They're not going to attack you. You don't want to. The 2 methods that I've used for handling them, one of them is to just grab on the thorax. So when I say the thorax, you have head, thorax, abdomen, right, from top down. So the thorax is just kind of like the equivalent of, like the chest of a person, basically. And, you just grab that area and you'll see that big cleft, that big round section, like near her shoulders. You're going to grab just kind of below that, basically, and just grab a hold. Don't squeeze too hard, obviously, because if you crack that exoskeleton, you're going to have some real serious issues. But squeeze just hard enough to hold on to her. That's the way that I did it for a long time. But I've started kind of just doing a few years ago, I started just grabbing both of the wings, like both sets of wings at the same time, and just squeeze the wings together. And like that's a good little handle. They don't need to fly anyway. It's not like you're going to damage, oh no, I broke half a wing off. In fact, a lot of places will cut the wings depending on what year it is. They'll mark the bees with a color, and then they'll clip the wing. So left wing is odd years, right wing is even years, something like that. But anyway, I will just grab those wings, and then that way you're not, you can't really squeeze a wing too hard. There's no, sensory nerves that are going to hurt them if you're touching the wing or something. You're not going to cause them pain and discomfort if you're touching the wing. But take that and then put them into a cage or something off to the side. Those clips always make me nervous because I feel like I'm going to open it up to put her in, and then as I'm closing, it's going to catch her right in the middle. But if it works for you and you like it, by all means do that. Be careful about putting them on your person. Like a lot of people have a bee suit or something, and they unzip and I'll just throw it here in this pocket. Like either one, they forget about her and go on, and then 2 hours later, they got a dead queen in their pocket. Or two, it's just too hot in there. There's no airflow, and it's just not necessarily the best. So, you can just go ahead and put her on top, and again, if it's, 2 o'clock in the afternoon in the middle of the summertime, it might get a little bit toasty there. So maybe you put her somewhere else where she's just out of the direct heat or whatever. But just be thinking about queen safety, queen happiness, queen well-being, all that good stuff. So we talked about genetics, mating flights, the possibility of supersedure. So I think we're going to kind of get towards wrapping things up here, but I want to just kind of do a little bit of a recap on some things. So before you requeen, like I said, wait, give it a little bit of time, look a little bit more, try to see if you can see a dead queen. Try and see if you can confirm 100% that there are definitely no eggs anywhere. Do a really detailed inspection. Take a little extra time and do that if that's what you have to do. Get a friend to help. If you really, really want to dive into it, grab a shaker box, where we have a queen excluder on the bottom, and we shake all the bees down into it and make them go back in. And the only thing left behind are queens and drones, right? All the workers can go through. But definitely take your time. Don't assume it's a dead queen right away. Look around for queen cells. Remember, like I said, they don't want to get rid of the queen if something's wrong. They don't want to get rid of her without a replacement plan. So if it's going to be a swarm and she's going to go with the swarm, they're going to leave queen cells behind. This goes into a separate discussion. I got the time. I might as well have it. So do I destroy queen cells or not? This is a common thing that I have. I saw some swarm cells and everything. Should I get rid of them? A lot of people will right away tell beekeepers, oh, if you've got queen cells, you better get rid of those. Get rid of them right away. You don't want them swarming. That's true, right? If you're trying to maintain that integrity of the entire hive and you don't want to split, you don't want to create new colonies, you don't want to swarm, you have to take action. But the action might not necessarily be destroying the queen cell. There may have been a problem of some sort, of any sort, and the next available cell area where the youngest larva was down near where you would typically see a swarm cell, but it's actually an emergency cell. So make sure when you see the cells that you also have a queen. It's also possible, too, that you got there, you see these queen cells, and you're like, whoa, good thing I found these in time. And you take them all out, and then you realize, wow, the population looks a little bit light. Oh, that's right, they swarmed yesterday, and the queen cells you just destroyed have your new queen in them. So take your time. Make sure you're looking for the cells. Another thing, too, is that I know as I get older, my eyes, that's the one that drives me nuts. I can deal with pretty much anything else, man, but I don't like the fact that I've got to have glasses on every time I'm looking at a computer now. But I have these grafting glasses, and they have these lenses you can go up to I think it's 4 or 5x, and it's really, really handy when you're grafting queen cells. But if you've got to get something like that or some, just some cheap readers, I've got some readers from Amazon. It's like a 5-pack was $13 or $14, and they have them all the way up to 3 or 4x. Get a set of those. Get you a set of those. Get a set of those and keep those, like I said, they're 5 for $13 or $14, so they're less than $5 a piece, $4 a piece, whatever they are. Well, $3 a piece. So you can just have them, have a pair in your car, your truck, in your bag that you take with you when you're doing inspections. You can put them all over the place. But if you're doing an inspection and you can't find that queen, break out a set of those glasses for 2 things. 1, to give you a nice good close-up zoom in on every bee you're looking at. But 2, use that to really look inside those cells. Those eggs sometimes are hard to see. And if they're not even raising new brood, they're not, the nurse bees are not allowing new brood to be reared or to be at least raised into workers, you may still see the eggs before they've had a chance to cannibalize them. But having those glasses will give you, a different, much more magnified, better perspective. So that's definitely worth checking out. Okay, so last wrapping up summary here. I think most of the time, don't beat yourself up. I don't think you're killing your queen, right? Yes, it does happen occasionally. Be careful with her. Be safe. Use some of those kind of tips I threw out your way. But most of the time, it's not necessarily the queen having a problem or that she is gone. Most of the time, it's probably going to be a situation where the colony is just regulating how much brood that they're going to rear and how much, how many new workers they're going to produce based on the resources they have available. So hopefully that will help all of you this spring. I know we're getting a little bit ahead of things. This is probably something you won't see for a few more months, but I have this huge list of questions and things that we're trying to get through to get everybody set up for the spring. And this is something that's going to come up. So if you are in this situation, even if you're not sure what it is, jump into our Discord room. If you go to the Beekeeping for Newbies homepage, we have a link to the Discord room in there. Activity now that we're getting closer to spring is starting to ramp up in there. Ask the question, say, hey guys, I'm a little nervous here. This is what I'm seeing. What do you think? We answer these questions all the time. It's the same questions year after year. It doesn't matter, right? Just keep asking. Nobody's going to get upset with you or give you a hard time. Come in there. Maybe we can give you some, a little bit of a sanity check. And, as always, you can check us out on YouTube as well. It's just at Beekeeping for Newbies. You got to make sure it's NEWBEES on YouTube. I don't have as much. God, I wish I had more time. Time is just the killer these days. But I'm trying to do the best to get more and more up there, and to, as part of like this kind of brand new beekeeper thing I've been doing. We talked about laws and rules and ordinances, and we talked about placement within the yard. I have some things in the yard right now, some samples of how you can, different approaches you can take to setting up bees within your yard. I just need to physically walk out there and press the record button. It's like 62 or 64 today. Would be a great day for it, but I got a bunch of stuff going on. So we'll get that video out here in the next week, I think. But yeah, check out the channel. There's a few tips and tricks here and there, a couple of ideas on things. One of them is I think top 5 things you're doing that's killing your honeybees. Top 5 reasons not to keep honeybees. That's on there as well. So anyway, take care, be kind to one another, and remember that I love you. There's nothing you can do about it. We'll talk to you soon.